Hello, everybody. Randy Patterson here again with Boomerosity. You wouldn't be a baby boomer if you weren't familiar with the great Jimi Hendrix. And if you've followed Boomerosity for very long at all, you know that last year, about a year or so ago, I interviewed Jimmy's baby sister, Janie, and had a great chat with her about several things. And she kind of opened the doors a little bit so that we can see into what all the estate is working on, the Jimi Hendrix estate. And she has done an amazing job in making the value of Jimi Hendrix's work and memory one of the most profitable estates that's out there of a past artist. And that, I think it ranked like number 2 to Elvis. If you can imagine that. So when I saw that Janie and her co-author, John McDermott, were putting out a book coming out in November, and by the time you're seeing this, it will be November. It is now mid-September that I'm recording this. There's going to be a wonderful book to commemorate what would have been Jimi Hendrix's 80th birthday. Can you imagine that? He passed away at 27. And had he lived, he would have been 80 years old today. And so this book, I got a sneak peek at it. It is amazing. You're going to want it in your library. You're going to want to give it as a gift to those music lovers, especially classic rock music lovers, and even more especially Jimi Hendrix fans. You're going to want to give them this book. So I had a great chat with both Janie and John McDermott, and we did it via Zoom. So this will be the first time you'll have seen Janie and John either separately or together on Boomerosity on video. John, if you're not already aware, has done some amazing work, put out some incredible books, especially on Jimi Hendrix. And he works very closely with and for the Experience Hendrix LLC, which is the estate of Jimi Hendrix that Janie is the president of. And so together they've put together a phenomenal book with tons of pictures and some really unique ways of presenting the artifacts of the Hendrix family and of Jimi himself. And some great history contained in there, some great writing in the book. And so some of it you'll have seen before, but this will be the first time it's all been put together in one great volume, as well as some new stuff that's been added. So without any further ado, here is my chat with Janie Hendrix and her co-author, John McDermott. Until next time, this is Randy Patterson with Boomerosity. Take care. Hello, hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you two doing?
Very well, thank you.
Well, Janie, it's the first time you and I have got to see each other. We spoke about a year ago, and John, this is our first time meeting, and I appreciate you both taking the time to talk about this great book you guys have coming out. I mean, wow, I got to see a soft copy of it, a PDF copy of it, and then went through it, and my Lord, it's mind-boggling what you guys have put together here. It's how long did you work on that to get it ready for production?
I think probably, maybe a year, or Janie, or say? Or...
Yeah. Yes.
No, it was quite a process, but we had worked on a previous book and other projects, and we worked obviously together on all the various projects, so it's an easy flow. So it isn't like we had to, stop everything and jump into this. But
right.
But I would say, yeah, that was probably about a year.
Yeah. Well, I knew you had a book out, John, on some stuff that was pretty in depth. And in fact, I'm on a mad search to try to find a first edition copy of it. So maybe someday I can send it to you to sign. But that one's a little hard for me to track down right now. But this thing here, I mean, I guess one of the things that I would want to know, first of all, is what drove this? I know it would have been Jimmy's 80th birthday, but was there anything else that was kind of driving this particular project?
Well,
I think it was that. It
Yeah.
was first of all, we did an illustrated book which has a lot of the same essence of the Jimi book, but the Jimi book is so much more than what, in a lot of ways, than what we did in the illustrated, because though the pieces aren't interactive, which I think was really cool because it's like, touching real things, but we're able to put more in this book. And being that it was a larger book, I think the paper's amazing. But I think that, first of all, the driving force was the fact that it was Jimmy's anniversary of his life, and wanting to get something out that was really cool and something that people would love, because the illustrated book, of course, sold out, and there really aren't any copies of it in our archives left. And when we met with Chronicle, it felt like a right fit, and they were able to do it very quickly, and they were wonderful to work with, very easy to work with. We had several Zoom calls together, and I think the end product is proof in the pudding of what it really should be and could be. I love your backdrop. I want that, actually. That's really awesome.
I'll send it to you. I hope you aren't missing any covers of the book, because right there. So,
Yeah.
So were there, I know some of this is stuff you had worked on either individually or together in the past, but were there any surprises that took place when you were putting this together? I know you kind of provided some things that weren't seen before, if I read correctly, and I think I picked those out as I was going through. But was there any surprises in putting this together and being able to, in doing this?
Well, for me, I'll say this. One, of course, as we've gone on, it's almost like Jimmy's our angel guidance behind us always, or in front of us, pointing out different people to go talk to. But then, like, people come out of the woodworks, and we have photos, or they have some artifact that we have acquired. But Chronicle also was a great partner to work with, because when I was looking through the final copy, I was like, okay, I just thought somebody was like Post-it notes. If you notice, like on every 5 or 6 pages or so, there's like a little doodle, like little arrows or hearts or something like that. And I just thought, artistically, they got a little carried away. But they're like, no, those are Jimmy's doodles that they had pulled from various handwritten lyrics or things that were in a journal. And I thought that was really cool, because honestly, I had probably never really focused in on those, because when you're reading the lyrics, I'm looking at some of his other like bigger doodles, but all these like little kind of iconic 60s type doodles. It was so Jimmy, because that's what he would do. He'd be on the phone with a pad and just doodling little hearts and arrows and drawings. He used to draw stuff on my hands. And so I thought that was very sweet and very cute, and was really reflective of who he was as a person, because he was very sweet and kind, and those little notes on the page, I really feel he captured like that part of him.
I agree, because to me, as a fan and as a reader of the book, it's kind of a continued extension of that picture of you and him together, which to me, it just encapsulates the whole, thing between you two. And to me, that's probably one of the most heartwarming photos involving your brother that I've ever seen. And I've been a fan since I was a punk kid, so John, for you, was there any surprises from your perspective in putting together this book?
I think I looked at it from the opportunity side. I thought we were really happy with the illustrated book, as Janie had said, and this was an opportunity to take it in a different direction, to not necessarily just replicate something we'd already done, but have a chance to go back in and add more to it. So that was, that was great. And I can only speak for myself. I've been so fortunate to work on so many Jimi Hendrix projects that it's exciting to be able to think, you guys haven't seen this before. We've had that benefit. Now we're sharing it with you. It's like Janie said, we're always on the hunt, whether it's an audio recording or film footage or photography. In this book, the photography, you're going to see things which are just amazing to see. So I kind of like that sharing aspect of it. It's kind of like what we do when we put out one of our documentaries or anything that we do. It's like to be able to show people the story, because nothing articulates Jimi better than Jimi. And to be able to add, all this context to it now that we have, I think it's exciting. It's fun to do.
Go ahead, Janie. It looked like
I was going to say, honestly, to add to that, it's funny that John says it the way he says it, because growing up, my dad was that person. People would hitchhike across the country, show up at our doorstep. They would be welcomed in because they were Jimi's fans. They could have been serial killers. We don't know, but they'd be welcomed in. He would have them sign the guest book. He would be so proud to show our music room. He had a room that was set up like a music room that had Jimi's posters on the walls, the ceiling, everywhere, plus some of Jimi's items, his guitars, and he'd bring out the postcards and bring out some of his drawings. If he really, felt comfortable with the person, it was a whole show and tell thing. And I feel like that's what we do as a company. It's it's a show and tell, really. It's look at what we have in our vaults and our collection. And now we want you to have it in your collection and, in the capacity that we're putting it out. So I feel like it's that extension of welcome to Jimi's world, welcome into our house, welcome to our dinner table. Let's commune together and let's share this and let's talk about it. And that's how I feel what we do, whether it's the music, the releases, the documentaries, the book, it's all of that. It's just, we want you to see every angle and aspect of Jimi and who he was, because most people just hear the music and they don't always know, when we're in the studio, Eddie will go oh, he's using his teeth there. He's not even watching the video. He may not even actually been at that show, but he's that's his arm. That's, he's actually doing this with the guitar. And so being able to share that with fans and the audience is really a blessing, to be able to be in the position that we are.
Did Janie, was any of this that you've shared in this book, did you feel a little exposed or vulnerable with sharing any particular item, is because of how close it was to you and your family, or maybe you felt like maybe that's might be something you want to kind of withhold for good reason, of course, but I'm just wondering if there's anything that you said that's in the book where you go, all right, I'm just going to do it and kind of hold my breath while I do it.
I don't think this time around, no. I think, we've gotten to the point where, first of all, Jimi did amazing work in 4 years. He wrote over 200 songs. The amount of work that he put in during that time, most artists don't do in their whole lifetime of decades and decades. So to be able to share it the way we have been able to in the different formats is, really brings me joy. I know it brings John joy to bring it to fans in the different ways, whether it's in a book or a video or, these little pop-ups, or music-wise. And we have so much more that we're working on. And right now we're in the studio trying to bring the music in a whole different way, because there is only so much that he created, and he's not going to create anymore, obviously. But we, being the good stewards that we are taking what he has created and bringing it to the fans in the way I like to see it is technology finally caught up to Jimi. Yeah. And so we're really able to bring the fans the music in the way that Jimi wanted them to hear it, experience it, feel it in your bones is what he would say. Just to be at a concert of his and to feel that the bass and the guitar and seeing his performance. People can't see that anymore in person, but we try our best to bring it to them in the way technology allows now.
Well, I think it's wonderful. I'm just curious, is there an artifact, a photo, a piece of memorabilia that you've heard about or that you know about, but you haven't been able to put your hands on that you wish you could have to include with this book?
Well, I don't know that I would say with the book, but there's certainly footage and sound recordings that we were always on the hunt for. But I don't know necessarily about the book per se, but I think, as Janie said, Jimmy created a finite amount of wonderful work. And, if there's something out there, I always say this: if you could find a wire recording of Robert Johnson you've never heard before, or if there's something that, any great artist from American culture, for any culture, you treasure it. It's wonderful. Like, oh, what a discovery. So I think we always are on the lookout, particularly now with technology. As Janie said, we're able to present it in ways where you might not have been able to before. But I think if the book can do something and inspire somebody to get into Jimmy's catalog, we always say this: if you dip your toe in the water, Jimmy's got you, because you're going to love his music. To some kids, it's his identity. To some kids, it's his technical skill as an instrumentalist. It's his voice for some people. It doesn't matter. It's Jimi Hendrix. It's wonderful stuff.
Yep. And he's as visual as he was audible, right? I mean,
yeah, of course.
He was a whole package, man. You just, and to do it all left-handed. Yeah. That's what blows my mind. So
he was it's funny. Yes, he was a tremendous talent. But boy, he worked really hard. That talent was honed. You know what I mean? This was a self-taught guy who worked hard as a sideman, who, really fought to make it, to bring his talent to a greater light. So, yes, he was an amazing artist, but boy, you got to give him credit for the hard work he put into it.
Well, as speaking again as a fan, I know that when I talk to other people and even other artists, and we talk about their work and then their influences, of course I hear about, the influence that the Beatles had on somebody, and everybody seemed to have that impact. For me, even earlier was Elvis. He was the first concert I ever went to. Elvis was, and there's that reverential awe for those two, but then it seems like almost like a rarity and a bragging point because of how, the short period of time that Jimmy was around and performed. It's just like a super VIP class of people said, yeah, I got to see Jimi Hendrix. And to me, that speaks volumes, because again, as you've heard it countless times, I'm sure, that period of time, though so brief, I mean, people are still mystified by it all and still overwhelmed by it all. And I would dare say, to a certain extent, it even in its own way supersedes how people feel about the Beatles or about Elvis in a very unique and specific way, and not to take away from those people, but Jimmy really captured something. And I think people spend a lifetime trying to define what that is. And I think, again, that speaks to his impact, his talent, his devotion to what he did, to his craft.
Sure.
But so, John, does your involvement with all this, does it just seem kind of a bit surreal for you that maybe, years ago you were a fan? I know for me, this is my second time talking with Janie, but so for me as a fan, it's kind of like, hot dang, I get to talk to, Jimmy's sister again,
Well, I have the greatest job in the world. Make no mistake. I am a fan. Of course, I've always been a fan, and I love the music, and I'm always grateful to the opportunity that Janie and the Hendrix family, including, Al Hendrix, who's a wonderful guy. We've been entrusted to do something really good. You know what I mean? And I think that that's been wonderful for me for the last 30 years, is to be able to contribute and work together in such a way to share this great thing. It's not like we got to force you. Well, if you listen to it this way or look at it this way, it really could be good. It's just like, hey, here's this amazing footage we found of Jimi Hendrix in Miami. It's amazing. And as you look at it, you're like, God, this is another piece of the puzzle that hasn't been seen before. So it's always things like that. But I mean, the cliche is living the dream, but I really do. I'm obviously grateful and take the responsibility very seriously that this is somebody's legacy that they worked really hard to create. And so, we've really made it our mission, and it's been great.
Has your perception of Jimi changed from before you got involved with the estate to where it is now? What has changed about your perception of Jimi?
Well, it's an interesting question. Years ago, when I'd written a book that was published in 1992 called Setting the Record Straight, because I was very disturbed as to why this great artist and the way that his legacy had been dealt with really in the 20 years after his death. But I think as you get deeper and you realize, context, but, inside a lot of his creative decisions, things that they were doing, you get a deeper understanding and in some instances appreciation for some of the opportunities and pressures that were on him every day. So I think you learn more. And I guess my feeling would be that this is still a story we're learning about. You know what I mean? It's not something that, is cut and dried and like, this is it. There's really, we've had the benefit now of speaking to all of the key people who are directly, associated with Jimi, to go through his entire recorded library, to go through his entire, archive of film footage and things like that. So all that stuff informs us more about Jimi, and hopefully we've been able to bring some of that knowledge to the projects that we've done. Like the Hear My Train A Coming documentary, so that if you're a fan, what we hope for you is that the people that are on screen aren't just anybody. We want you to realize that these were key people in Jimi's life. So to hear from them, what we hope is that they're giving you a window from their perspective and their interaction with Jimi. So we kind of see really the same thing in the book. Like, we're kind of the messenger for the message. Like, okay, this is what he was trying to do during this period with these particular musicians. So, it's, I think we're still learning about him, which is part of the fun and fascination. But, it's an important responsibility to try to get it right. So I think that always is kind of a guiding principle for what we're trying to do.
Janie, what do you hope fans take away from the book?
For me, I always feel like there are fans. First of all, John was saying there's fans at all different levels. There's fans that love it because they're musicians themselves, or they're trying to figure it out. I feel like years ago, at least when Jimi first was alive, or when he initially passed away, there was a persona that was created around who the managers wanted him to be. And that wasn't really who he was. And I remember just hearing his conversations around the dinner table about his frustrations with his management and how things were going and how he wanted it to go his way. And I feel like that's what we are trying to do, is make it go his way. Like when we recreated Electric Ladyland and put it out, not necessarily recreated it, but did the album the way he wanted it, including what he wanted his designs to be. He drew it out how he wanted the layout for Electric Ladyland to be, but the powers that be didn't want to listen to him, and they did it their way. And so in every step that we take, we try to do it in with him in mind and what he would want to do, or what we feel like he would want as far as what he has already done. It's not us, as John says, he did all the heavy lifting. We're just really kind of the one that, pushes the doors open to make it happen. And I just want people to see like all the facets of Jimi, because he's a very fascinating person. His artistic ability, whether it be in paintings, drawings, his handwritten lyrics, his message to people. Some say he was a prophet. I think that a lot of his lyrics are very prophetic. And for me, they meant a certain thing as a child. And really, it is cliche to say it was a soundtrack of my life, but it was. And now, like listening to some of the music, I pick up on different things that are applicable to my life now and throughout the decades that I have lived, because I have now lived more than twice of what he did. And, I'm just his, and I shouldn't say just, but I am proudly his keeper of the flame. And I make sure that people see him for what we have always seen him as. And as John says, we continue to learn more about him, listening to his banter in the studio, whether it be with Eddie or between the other musicians that he's playing with. He was a lot of fun. He had a great sense of humor. He could be light, but he also could be very heavy when it came to making sure that the music was done the way he wanted it to be. As Billy Cox says, he was the boss, and you could tell he was the boss. He might have been very quiet and soft-spoken, but that wasn't weakness. That was his kindness, and he was a genius in what he was doing, and he had a plan, and he was following that plan of how he was putting his music out. And so, unfortunately, he passed at 27, but we just continue to share his work and his mission, because there is so much more music that can still be released and shared with the public. Kind of like, welcome to our vault, and here we are.
Well, Janie, after our last, I wish everybody could have heard, and they will hear this. I hope they take the time to hear what you just said when this post, closer to the time when the book comes out. But as you recall, the last interview you and I did, there was some negative blowback from fans, and for whatever reason, they felt that chose to be negative towards you. And I don't understand that, because all I see from you and your efforts, and I'm not saying this to patronize you, I'm not trying to suck up, it's just a clear observation, in my opinion. You're doing wonders in not only preserving the estate in his memory, but you're, like you said, you want people to see things, and you want things to be redone in the ways that, from what you have in the notes and the stuff that Jimi left behind, to do it the way he wanted it to do. And why won't fans just embrace that? I don't get it, But you take a lot of heat, and I want to say again, you do a phenomenal job in keeping the memory alive and providing fans what we all want. We want, just when we didn't think there was more of Jimi to have, we're getting it. And, kudos to you for making that happen, to both of you.
Thank you. First of all, I don't know if there was any, I try not to read the negative press. I was taught by my father years ago to not look into that, because, as my dad would say, we own it. They never will. That's my dad's words. And we will do, he has left me in charge. I was in the trenches with him, battling to get our rights back. I think that sometimes the negative voice is louder than the positive voices. I feel like I have been approached by many people that love Jimi and love what we've been doing. And, there are haters that are going to hate, but just try not to concentrate on that. Heck, people booed Jimi. They threw fruit at him when he was on stage. They threw stuff at him. they weren't always kind to him. It's just, human nature is human nature, but we just do our job and try to keep our nose to the grindstone and make sure that while we have our time here on this earth, is that we just continue to spread Jimmy's message and his word and make sure that people get to hear and see Jimi for what we know him to be.
Cool. Recently, the Elvis movie came out. I know you guys have been involved with, documentaries and film on Jimi. Did it inspire any ideas that going, maybe we ought to do, apply what we see from the Elvis movie and let's do something about Jimi on this? Did it kick up any ideas for you?
Well, it's certainly been a process we've been, engaged with from time to time. But you got to be very careful with this because you have to get the story right. You have one chance, and you certainly don't want to undo a lot of the good work we've tried to do to share Jimi's music in there. So it's a careful responsibility, certainly, that Janie and the family have to weigh, like how to best do this and present this, because he's that special an artist. There's no rush to have to do it, if you understand what I mean. Like, right. It's like, oh no, we've got to be able to do this. I think it's really more about it being, it's really more about being the right person or the right story and capturing it and presenting it in a way that would grow it as opposed to confuse people or disappoint them.
Yeah, I agree. I love the Elvis movie, but I guess my problem is, I wanted to see them cram, the good parts of 42 years into 2 hours, and that's hard to do. You're going to miss something no matter what, so.
Well, what's interesting with the movie, right, is just to think about it, is that it's somebody else's creative approach, even though it is a story, as opposed to Jimi Hendrix's. So, what he creates is fascinating to people. With the movie, you've got to be careful that person's on that level, understanding the responsibility. You know what I mean? It's a weighty job. You have to really be carefully.
Either do it right or not at all, right? So,
I can say I did not see the movie. One of my sons did, and he said he didn't like it. And so I decided not to watch it. I feel like I went to Graceland not really knowing what to expect. I thought it was going to be really kind of cheesy, but it wasn't. And I loved Graceland. And so I guess for me, I just want to remember that those aspects of Elvis and everything I saw at Graceland. I thought it was really cool. Like the whole exhibit, the way it was all presented, the home that they still utilize for Thanksgiving dinners and whatnot. And just, I learned a lot about the good that he did, in his community and with his neighbors and people around, with the church that burnt down. And I really feel like that's the memory I want of Elvis, not someone else's interpretation, because this was his home and this was actually the sofa he sat on and all of his appliances and his pickleball court or whatever it was. And his, to me, that was more fascinating than watching someone else's interpretation of someone. Yeah. For us, we've always tried to let Jimi tell his own story. And yes, we'll have some people also telling their version of what happened in their perspective, but not necessarily speaking for Jimi. Like Jimi's, whether it's our documentaries where he's performing, and you have people that were, like in Maui, they were there, they were surfers, or they were in the town, or, they helped set up, or whatever was going on. That's kind of like we take you through that journey. It's not like necessarily someone who's 20 years old talking about what happened when they weren't there, So anyways, so that's that answer. But as far as what John was trying to tell you, it's like, there are a few projects that we have been working on. We've been asked many times. One is Royal Albert Hall. And yes, one day we do hope to release that. It's not totally on our shoulders and in our hands to be able to do it solely because we have a partner, but we will. It is amazing. It is definitely a day in a life, a week in a life, being on tour with Jimi for a month. It's a wonderful experience. And you get to see not an actor portraying Jimi, but Jimi as himself, whether he's getting on a train or an airplane or in a car to go to the concert or backstage. It's like, it's an amazing journey to be a part of, and one day we'll be able to release it. We did have a showing of it in London at the Royal Albert Hall prior to COVID and had a great turnout, and people that came out, they really loved it. So we do want to share it with the world at some point.
It's funny you should mention about the Royal Albert Hall. I just hour and a half ago, I interviewed for the fourth time Cosmo Clifford from CCR, and Friday night on Netflix, their Royal Albert Hall performance is going to be available for viewing. So I'm sure there'll be some ideas there too. But I'm always anxious to see what you guys are putting out from the estate. It's never cheesy. It's never. Of course it leaves us wanting more, but that's the nature of it all, right? That's what we all want. We want to want more and we want to get more. So it just kind of feeds on itself. So to that point,
enjoy Credence, by the way. Our friend Bob Smeaton was the director of that film, and Bob's worked with us on probably 10 projects over the years. So I'm sure it's going to be really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and even Cos spoke very highly of it. He's seen it, of course, and he loves it. So I'm anxious to see it. To hear all the positivity around it is always a good thing. So that's what I look forward to. Final question for you both. I know you got things to do. What's next for you two? What are you guys working on that you can talk about?
Oh.
Well, we just announced a project for November, which is Jimi's Los Angeles Forum concert from April of '69. That's really the big focus release for this year. It's never been on vinyl before. Eddie Kramer did a wonderful job remixing the performance. It's the package that we put together includes a foreword by Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top, who was at the show and actually had opened for Jimi. In '68, the previous year. So, I think it's what we're trying to do in addition to not only just present this amazing performance is, again, now that we're 50 years on, in this case, we're 52 or 3 years on, is to provide a little context. Like, Jimi was the third artist to play the LA Forum. It just opened it up and, he was, sold the place out and people were excited, and it's a significant show, and again, it's the kind of thing that should be in a Hendrix fans collection.
Cool. I look forward to that. I just thought of this, and I don't know why I didn't mention it earlier. Somebody I interviewed several years ago, early in Boomerosity's existence, was the current executive or producer for Days of Our Lives, Ken Corday. And when I interviewed him, the thought just flashed through my mind. I think he was at the Maui show, and he was talking. And here I was interviewing him about his book and about, Days of Our Lives, and we get off talking about Hendrix, so, it goes again to what we were talking about earlier. Jimi just, he sucked us all in a wonderful way, and it touches so many areas, not just music, but, it touches the whole breadth of our culture back then. And to even hear somebody that, whose parents created a famous and still running soap opera, and that he was there, that just is a symbolic ball of twine there of how it all just is intertwined with each other. And you can't talk about one without the other, really.
Sure.
So I think it's all wonderful. It's why I do what I do. And to that point, I appreciate you both taking the time. And for making this happen, and for the publisher got an advanced soft copy to me. I look forward to getting the hard copies, and if I can finagle getting you both to sign a copy for me, I would be eternally grateful. So we'll talk about that downstream when when those are available. But I keep them. Nobody gets them until I die. They're not going to be sold.
When it would be our pleasure to sign a copy for you. When you do get a hard copy in your hands, you know, I was doing an interview not too long ago about this, and I was like going through it as, you know, for the first time really while I was talking to her, to actually have it in front of me. And I just kept saying, oh my God, like the colors are so vibrant and the paper is so amazing. And she's like, could you talk about something else besides the paper? But I'm just like, I cannot, until you have it in your hands, and you're like, because books have almost become obsolete, you know, people use Kindle or whatever. But to actually, it's like our vinyl, to be able to turn the pages and look through old tour books or whatever. It's that connection, you know, and I couldn't like really connect with her when I was trying to explain to her, like, it was just so amazing to be able to just touch it, feel the weight of it. And just, it's a beautiful book, and it's worthy of anyone's collection who loves Jimi. Definitely.
I can't wait to get my hard copy of it. And if you didn't see, if it wasn't for this virtual screen with this beautiful covers behind me, you would see all sorts of books on my bookcases behind me. Some of them are about Jimi. And but I agree with you. It's kind of like an album. And I didn't write this question down, but Janie, I'd be curious to get your take on this. I mean, Jimi was as much visual as he was audible, as I said earlier. And those albums, the vinyl albums, were so much part of the artistry that he was. Do you think that his work would have been minimized at all if he had been, if at the time it had been, say, CDs instead of vinyl, or downloads instead of vinyl? I mean, you can't take away from the sound, but do you think that from the appeal he had, if it would have been minimized if it hadn't been the vinyl era?
Well, that's a lot of ifing, but I feel like, you know, really the time that Jimi came along was the perfect timing for everything, for him and for the world. And I just wish he could have stayed around longer to give us more wonderful music.
Yep.
But we'll continue to work with what we have and share it with the world. Because I think most importantly for us, you know, we've never stopped creating vinyl, because I think vinyl is amazing. And of course, Jimi's first love before the guitar was art. He loved art, and his album covers are still like at the top of the list for, you know, what people feel are amazing artwork for the album covers. So, you know, he loved art, and his music was art, and it's all like visual, it's feeling, it's hearing, it's experiencing. And so I think that, you know, we put out CDs, you can download it. You get music every which way you want it. You know, it just depends on how you want it. But I still love vinyl. So
Same here. And thank you for keep putting out new ones so we can enjoy it all over again. So
yes.
Listen, Janie and John, thank you so much. And hopefully I can talk to you again down the road when the next project comes out. And I will keep telling people about it and plugging it, and we'll be talking sometime soon.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot. Stay safe, y'all. Bye-bye.